Torej, dragi gostje, eno res veliko veselje mi je in v čast, da je prišlo do tega dogodka oziroma do tega tedna, do tega projekta, da lahko pri nas v Ljubljani, v tej lepi in mali akademiji gostimo eno tako veliko osebnost, kot je gospod Dmitry Sitkovecki. Prosim, še eno. Ne bom govoril o njegovi celi karieri, ker bi lahko tukaj bili 3 ure, verjetno samo zaradi tega. Za mene eden največjih glasbenikov tega časa, izjemna kariera kot violinist, kot dirigent, tudi aranžer, vse, kar je povezano z glasbo, učitelj, z izjemno kariero, ki traja že skoraj 50 let, z glasbenim pedigrejem, ki je neverjeten, to se pravi, lahko rečemo glasba v genih. Imel sem to res srečo, da sem v času službovanja v filharmoniji ga spoznal, ko je prišel dirigirati, in od takrat naprej, tudi po veliki zaslugi mojega prijatelja Klemna, našega prijatelja Klemna Hvale, smo naredili veliko projektov v Ljubljani z njim in končno je zdaj tudi tukaj za nas, za naše študente, in to je res en izjemen dogodek. So, it's difficult to start somewhere, but you know, we had really a nice opening day. Very nice. It was a working day, but we played some good music, and I think we started really well. And we already heard some really good advices and stories about music.
Yeah.
But I would like to start actually in your early days of life. So maybe we know that you come from a musical family. So your father was Dmitry Sitkovecki, amazing violinist. Unfortunately, he passed away too soon, much too soon. And your mother, Bela Davidovic,
still living, 96.
Yeah, winner of Chopin competition, am I right? And so you were born in Baku, so you lived there?
No, never lived there. They like to claim me as their own because I love the city. I went there twice this year, and Baku is fantastic, especially now. It's just so beautiful. But in the 20th century, it was really a remarkable city culture, because when the oil came in at the end of the 19th century, they had this wonderful sort of visionary oil magnate. His name was Tagiev. He was the richest man in Baku. He had the biggest palace in the middle of Baku, which is now just a museum. But he also knew that just the oil and money is not going to make his nation go up. That was before the revolution, so it's not only in the Soviet time, it was before. So he built an opera house in 1909 with the money from oil. You know who else, by the way, made a lot of money? Somebody very famous, Nobel. Nobel was there right at the beginning of this 20th century. He made his fortune in Baku's oil refineries, because Baku is Azerbaijan is a very interesting country, because now they say, oh, it looks a little bit like, it looks like Dubai, all this fantastic buildings. It's not Dubai at all, because Dubai has no history. It's all built on sand in the middle of the desert. It's Disneyland for adults, for all this, big sheikhs, seven of them, the Emirates and everything. No. Baku has a history of 4,000 years. The worshippers of fire. That's where they discovered, they didn't know what it was, but the fire was coming from the ground by itself. It was gas burning, and then from the sea, I saw it myself still, when Caspian Sea, all of a sudden in the middle of it, boom, would be a fire coming out. It's a miracle, because it's elements that are not supposed to be together. You put fire out with water, and when it comes out from water, it's a miracle. So Zoroastrians, for instance, they always were worshippers of fire. If you know magic flute, Zoroastro, yeah, the famous last opera of Mozart was magic flute, because he became a mason, and they believe in all of this. Zoroastrian is a very old religion, much older than Christianity, 2,500 years. But we went, versus last September, we went to the place where 4,000 years ago they discovered this. And a lot of Indians came there, and what now is Iran, but it's not Iran, it was Persia, and it was before. So they had 3 religions before Christianity, already there, living in harmony, many, many years ago. So somehow, Azerbaijan, which is really in its ethnic sort of elements, they're like cousins to Turks. It's a Turkish group, but they never became too they were never fundamentalists. You know, they were not terribly religious. And of course, during the Soviet time, it became even less so, because religion was suppressed, whatever it was, Muslim, Jewish, and there were some synagogues, there were some churches, but during the Soviet time it was not. So it was very conducive for the arts. He built the opera house, and they started to invite the Russians, the Russian Jews, Ukrainians, Belarusians, from wherever there was more culture. They came and started to live in Baku. That's how Rostropovich's father came to teach in Baku, and Rostropovich was born and lived for 6 years in Baku. Many, and that's how my mother was born. She was already she was first generation Bakunis, but she was really born and raised there till she was 17. But my great-grandfather was the concertmaster of this opera house, which was built in 19.
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather. I'm a 4th generation of professional musicians.
So which year?
On my left, on my mother's side, and on my father's side, only 3rd. But anyway, yeah. So my daughter is the 4th generation. I'm the 4th generation. My daughter is the 5th, and God forbid if my adorable grandson will become a musician. Then it's too much. But I know exactly when my great-grandfather became a professional musician. 1889, because there is a symbolic baton which was given to him in 1929 to commemorate 40 years of his professional life. That's not bad, 1889. And we are where? We're in 2024. So that's quite a lot of years. Almost soon will be, yeah, it's 135 years of musical practice. So for me, my mother only went there to have a birth. 5 weeks later, I was already in Moscow, because both my mother and from Baku and my father from Kiev, they already lived in Moscow, because they went to Moscow Conservatory and so forth. So I was brought up as a Muscovite. But part of my heart, especially now, since I don't go back to Russia at all, since the war started, Baku became more important in the last few years. So you sort of go back to where you were born. It's interesting, on my birthday first we went to the cemetery where my grandfather is buried, and then on the way there we went to the hospital where I was born, actually. Yes, so, and then we saw the house where they brought me, where my grandparents lived, and and so forth. So it's a very, very interesting place, and I recommend, if you are if you like traveling, definitely go to Baku. It's a big. Right now, they have over 100 heads of state. It's COP29. It's so ironic. The country that produces so much gas and oil, they're the hosts for the healthy environment, for the green energy. It's a little bit perverse, but our world is perverse. Anyway, so that's where now a lot of things. Our prime minister from England is there, Keir Starmer, is going there anyway. So we'll see. Its beginning was interesting because here's an interesting part that might be telling for the young people when you have kids or if you see somebody young. My mother took me to two. My father died when I was only 3 years old. I didn't play anything. I just heard him when I was much younger because he was sick for more than a year. He had a terrible lung cancer and he was in the hospital for a long time, and then they brought him home to die, basically, when I was 3.5. So she brought me to the piano teacher, famous piano teacher who taught Vladimir Ashkenazy and many others. And she said, oh, he has good rhythm, and of course I'll take him. Good rhythm, good ear, that was perfect pitch and all that. So that's no problem. But then she took me to the great violin teacher, Yankilevich. And he was very serious about it. He said, Bella, my mother, are you sure you want the son of Dmitry Sitkovecki, who was one of the greatest talents Russia ever produced, to be a violinist? You know how hard it's going to be for him? I said, well, I don't know. He said, you test him. I said, well, let me do this. I will give him for 6 months to one of my assistants. And then 6 months later, I'll see what he's like. And then I'll make a decision. You accept it? I said, absolutely. The only choice he gave her is, do you want a kind teacher or a strict teacher? She said strict, because she knew that I was not big on practicing and I always managed somehow.
Yep.
So he gave me Maya Glizarova. Oh boy, that was the fury.
I know
you heard. Yeah. No, we ended up being great friends, but I mean, those first years, very few people survived. It was survival of the fittest, because she yelled, she hit some students because the elbow was too high. She was, today she'd be in prison. She'd be completely, disallowed to teach, because today it's the other extreme in America. So you're not allowed to criticize. If you say anything, it's, it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel this. Are you here to learn, or are you here to defend the rights of something? Yeah, you're here to learn the craft. That needs criticism. If you want me to say that you're wonderful, anybody, your family will tell you even more that you're wonderful. I'm not there for that. But she was really tough. Anyway, 6 months later, he met with my mother and he said, listen, he certainly is not going to be like his father. Because my father was just a born violinist and born virtuoso, that you cannot teach certain things the way he played the violin. But he said he has something else, which I think violin and only violin. So that's how I became a violinist. But I could tell you for sure, I know it for a fact, that if my father continued to live and play, I wouldn't have become a violinist, no. I always had an inclination to write. Maybe I would try to be a composer. I later became an arranger, and as you know, and succeeded quite well in this. I love this transcription business. But I wouldn't have become a violinist. No, conductor maybe. Composer, conductor, but no. That is just too hard. And I know how so many of my colleagues that came from great performers, they all had enormous complexes, like the one, maybe the most extraordinary conductor that we went to see, Carlos Kleiber. Clement took me to see his grave. He's buried here in Slovenia, by the way. When you have a chance, go see it. It's very poignant. That's how great musicians should lay at rest. Not in a mausoleum, but very different. Anyway, he had a huge complex about his father, because his father was a great conductor, and his father thought nothing of his son. So that was another thing. I knew Igor Ostro. I knew Pavel Kogan, who stopped playing violin. I knew so many, the Rostropovich daughters, everybody. In Russia, my family was one of many dynasties. And in Central Music School, we had Shostakovich's grandson, Oistrov's grandson, Rostropovich, 2 daughters, Kogan, 2 children, Gila's, everybody was there. It was just a generational thing. How they did varied, of course, very, very much. Because it's almost impossible not to influence if you, not to be influenced by. I was influenced very interestingly by my mother without ever getting any lesson from her on the piano or anything else. No, we played together and had differences of opinion, even, especially when I started growing up. But I learned something from her, which the further I was from this, the more I understood what I learned. Because as a young boy or a young teenager, I was very rebellious in general. And I was not in agreement with a lot of things, of the way she thought about politically and this and that. I was always a rebel. That's why I left Russia alone before any of my family left. But what I learned, which is so precious, I learned by osmosis. In other words, just by being in the apartment where she practiced, how she practiced, how incredibly prepared she was for every rehearsal. I don't think she was ever late in her life. She certainly was never unprepared. And I thought, just subconsciously, that if you want to be a professional musician, that's how everybody is. I thought everybody was like this. Well, later I found out she was rather an exception. But, it was the best school. Because if she started to teach me, I would rebel it. I would do the opposite, or I would say, no, but she never did. I had my violin teacher, I had other teachers, but my mother, I just heard how she practiced slowly, beautifully, never too much, never that. My God, I had no idea that I was growing up in the house of a supreme professional. So that is, in many ways, the best way to learn from your family. Not that somebody will give you lessons. That's so hard. I know it from my wife, was a wonderful singer, Susan, and whenever she had to give a lesson to Julia once, she started, my God, difficult. To teach your children is not recommended. if you can avoid it. You can encourage, but only if they have an undeniable, burning talent and desire to succeed. Anything else, forget it. Better to enjoy it and do something else for a living. Don't kill yourself, because it is a hard life, especially now. I feel very, very concerned about it. I've seen more talents in the last maybe 10 years now that I give a lot more master classes and meet with young people. I started also during the pandemic, a lot of online lessons I give. Even here, though my schedule hardly allows for any free time, but I will give a lesson on Thursday online to Korea, because the girl is extraordinary. And, she's in Korea and I'm here. But, it's important to keep in touch. It's very, very difficult today to both discourage And it's dangerous to encourage because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you tell somebody, oh, you're going to have a career, who the hell knows? What I'm always trying to do in master classes and lessons, and you will see it on Monday, one thing I think is the most important and the most difficult is to enable a student, a musician, to hear what's wrong themselves. Because in my presence, I could tell you and make all kinds of minor miracles with me present. But then I'll be gone, and what are you going to do? You're going to lose it. No, that's not what I like. I like for you to hear it. That's already 50%, or just from very basic things. Bad bow change. How many of you really have a good bow change? It's a real skill and a bad habit from excessive practicing. Because the more we practice, the less we hear ourselves. It's just as simple as that. In order to hear every bow change, so the speed is exactly the same, and that's the secret. That's the only secret, is not to go slower, and because of the gravity to go faster. That's an accent right there. For violinists and violas. For cellos, it's a little bit better. It's a little bit different because the gravity is underneath, not quite as well. But violinists and violas, oh. And in order to conquer that one of three very important elements of the bow arm, you need to hear yourself when you practice. Every bad bow change. And stop, up, no, I'm not gonna, up, no. And I always ask if you play scales, because scales is the best way to find out what is wrong. Because scales is not just for left hand, not at all. Scales is also for the speed of the bow change, string change. That's a whole other uninhibited planet. I mean, I could show you on YouTube famous violinists with the most horrendous string change. You hear every string change they have. They never hear it. Nobody ever told them, and they never paid attention. Now it's too late because they're successful. So who am I to tell them that they were bad boys? You know, that's the problem. So, you know, that, and then the third one, which is really the high class quality, is the bow distribution. Because very often, for some reason, I know why, but as we start to teach, as we start to learn from the teacher, they tell us very specifically that you change the bow only here and only there. That's a big lie. Because it's good at the beginning, but it's not good later on. You should be able to change the bow any and every place on the bow. And if you don't do it, then whenever you need to go up bow and you hear it go, ooh, and you create immediately a bubble. Unwanted, uncalled for bubble because of the gravity and because you think you need to be there. No, you need to be in the right place, then it won't change. Simple things, common sense, almost impossible to train yourself to turn and hear how you sound. That's the hardest thing. But once you hear it, once you have that sort of good virus, you know, as a result of a lesson, then I know you will improve. Otherwise, you always need your teacher to tell you. And that he will or she will, not enough. Because you're not going to practice all the time with somebody present. I remember my nanny, my real Russia was my Russian nanny, and she used to take me to the lessons to this very stern Maya Glizarova, and she always, when she passed by, and I'm practicing, sometimes reading a book versus another thing, not a good habit, but I was bored, you know, practicing something. I like to perform, but later on I learned how to practice. So she'd go, I said, keep your violin high. Держи скрипку выше. Yeah, so keep the violin high. And I, just a little smart ass, I said, listen, sure, I adored her. She was like my second mother. She spent more time with me than my mother. I said, sure, tell me, in your Kaluga region, in a little village there, is everybody keeping violin high? Which is not the right answer. I just didn't think she was qualified to tell me to get it. She had no connection, but she knew what I needed and she pushed for it. Yeah. So, you know, these things, it's a long answer for that, but this was the beginning. This was the beginning.
What is also interesting for me, and maybe for us, how and why you went to New York?
Oh, well, that's a whole, that's a whole chapter, or maybe several chapters. Well, first of all, because, I mean, the short answer is this. Because I was the son of famous, successful, especially in case of my mother, because my father died so young, but I knew all the elite, like David Oistrakh, like Rostropovich, like Daniil Shafran, fantastic cellists, who lived in the same floor for a while in the same building, and many others. I knew the great contrast and dichotomy between their status when they were on stage, Lord, you know, flowers, and that's what usually attracts kids who don't know the backstage story. Backstage, they were ordered by the party members, by the trade union, and while they, you know, abroad KGB, and Oistrakh, you know, was a great soloist everywhere, and any clerk in the embassy could tell him, and it was an order, like the government speaks to it, that you're not going to meet with so-and-so, you're not going to their apartment, you're not allowed to speak to this one, and where's all the money that you earn? So basically, I learned very early on from those people and from my mother that they were glorified slaves of the system. So the whole attraction of being a great Soviet artist already had a real poison in it, because I didn't want to be part of that system. So the other thing, which was also very important for me, because I was so well known since I was born, not because I did something. I did win my first competition when I was 12. That was useful. But anyway, it wasn't because I was so remarkably accomplished, but just because of my last name and because I was the son of Belgrade. I don't think I've ever bought a ticket to a concert because all the ushers knew me since I was a little boy. In other words, many doors were opened for me, not because of me, but because of my name, because of me. So I wanted to know if actually, if I remove myself from all that shortcut, privileged life. It is a privileged life. I was, you know, I was born into musical aristocracy, yeah? And I was known, I could get a ticket to a theater, to Bolshoi theater, to ballet, to opera and everything, without paying, without, oh, just because of, it's also being spoiled. It's spoiled without, because you haven't earned it yourself. Your parents are, not you. So somewhere, being a rebel, I wanted to know if I could actually do something on my own, without any support, and without any recognition of my last name. So those were two. I hated the system, but also it was a personal odyssey, if you like. Yeah, I'm just reading now Odyssey by Stephen Fry, fantastic. I read all his myths heroes and Troy, and now it's hard to say, oh, what a wonderful story. I mean, I knew the story before, but it's different now. And so that's how I came to New York.
22 years old, yeah?
22, I was not quite 23, and I arrived on September 11th, 77. And at that time, September 11th didn't have the connotation that it has now, you know. September 11th, 2001, that was a long, long way ahead. So the next day, I went to Juilliard School because I knew that Rostropovich wrote a letter. He asked me, because he knew me, he knew my parents before I was born, they were friends, and he wanted to write a letter of recommendation to the Juilliard School so they would allow me to take late exams. It was just the week when I arrived, when September, second week of September, they were having late exams to be accepted or not for Juilliard. So that was my only chance to get in. And I wanted to study with Galamin, not delay, for specific reasons, and because I heard Galamin's students in Montreal competition, and three of them were wonderful, but very different. And I loved it, because Yankelevich, Russian school, Soviet school, was very uniform. Yankelevich had the whole system and a factory of competition winners. Fantastic. I mean, he was the first one when there were so few competitions. He had 13 different first prize winners of international competition. Unbelievable when you think of it. 66 when I won it, the little boy, 12, Concertino Prague. There were two other first prize of his. It was Viktor Tretyakov, Tchaikovsky, and Vladimir Lanzmann. I adore Volodya, I knew him, but he's even older than Vitya Tretyakov. And I remember when I saw Tretyakov last time, in 2016, there was 150 years of Moscow Concert. Momentous occasion. I happened to be in Russia, so I went. I mean, they invited me, so I came, played a concert. He played a concert. There was a big party. And I said, Vita, do you remember 1966? Because he and I were played at the 100th anniversary. 50 years, half a century earlier. I was not quite 12. He was, 5 years, 6 years older. And so, of course, like it was yesterday. And then at the end of the year, they had this special program, Голубой огонек. It was a big program, Vasily probably would know. And at the end of the year, the great accomplishments of the Soviet people. And there was one table, 4 people, 4 chairs, was Yankelevich, with 3 first prize winners, including 12-year-old Dima, and we all played a little bit. So that was a big deal, because 66 was, there was very few competitions. So Yankelevich had a very specific system, and many sounded the same, because, I had a different kind of mind, which he later on realized that I was not going to take everything that he offered up. I always had my own ideas. That was not easy in Yankelevich's class. He had a system, the system worked, and I remember bringing him a little, Pugnani Chrysler, Prelude in Allegro, and I worked up some interesting fingerings in that one. When you go up. He said, where did you get those fingerings? I said, I actually made them up myself. He said, really? I said, yes. I was 9 years old. He said, good. Now, copy mine and play mine. That was it. So,
End of story.
My way or highway. That's it. So I love Galamin because Galamin had 3 completely different, wonderful violinists. And one was just sitting together with him at the Brussels competition, Dong Suk Kang. Oh, he played so fantastically in those days. And the other one was Gerardo Ribeiro, who I also saw in the summer. He taught in Meadowmount. And then the third one is no longer living, Peter Janowski. Peter Janowski was the 16. He already won Wieniawski. What a talent he was. Anyway, all three completely different. I like that. So, 3 days later, I had to take 5 exams, including the violin exam. I tried to play for Galaiman before, so no, I have no time. I'll see you on Wednesday. So I arrived on Sunday, on Wednesday I played. And Thursday, I was accepted with full scholarships, but because I didn't have any support at all, I was alone. But I still needed to work to earn money. There was no dormitory, so I had to pay the rent, pay for food. New York City was never cheap. Now it's really ridiculously expensive, but even then it was pretty expensive. And so I needed a job. And there was this competition, it was audition, the second week was an audition for National Orchestral Association. It's like the best students from Brooklyn College, Manhattan School, all New York, schools, Juilliard, of course, where I was. And so I played my audition. The conductor looked at me and said, "Ooh, would you like to try for a concertmeister?" I said, "Why not? It's more money. Why not?" Yeah, and I needed money. So I said, "When is it?" He said, "Tomorrow." I said, "What do I need to play?" And he gave me a list of 10 solos, out of which I knew one. Scheherazade I played in Moscow. But there was Heldenleben. I never heard Heldenleben before. Zarathustra, Firebird, Brahms 1 I heard. I never played, but I heard, of course, at least. So the 10 solos. So I said, "Tomorrow." Okay, I'll come. So I went immediately to Lincoln Center Library, fantastic place where you could find all the music and all the recordings, of course, LPs. So I got myself headphones there. I listened. I took the scores, whatever the parts. Next day I played, I got the position. So, this is how it is. In life, you have to be on your toes. I mean, you have to be completely ready for what seems mission impossible. No, it's possible. It's possible. I was well prepared, maybe not for orchestral life yet. That I learned a lot more while I was in New York, because there was all kinds of jobs. We did 9 o'clock in the morning an opera in Long Island. It takes almost 2 hours to get there. We would meet at 7 in the morning just to make some money. That's it. Opera here, there, freelance. How else would you earn money while you're a student? Like this. But I spent a lot of time in that library because it was such a great opportunity to find anything you want, to look at the score, to hear a recording. There were 2 big attractions at Juilliard for me at that time, apart from dance division. That was just so good for the eye when all the dancers were there in cafeteria. My God, that was already, you thought that you came to Juilliard for something special, and it was. But the interesting part was Juilliard Theater. They played plays because it was a fantastic theater department. Juilliard was not just a music school. Just before I left, I came to Juilliard, Robin Williams just graduated, and then Christopher Reeve and Elizabeth McGovern. They were fantastic regisseurs, the directors there. John Houseman, of the Method, and the student of Elise Strasberg, and it goes directly from what they called Method that came from Russia, but that there was Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro. They were all method actors, which is connected to the Stanislavski method. So they were fantastic plays, and you could get it for free because you're part of the Juilliard. So I was That's how I learned English also, and listen. And from there, they went to Hollywood. I saw many people who, the one who did L'Histoire du Soldat with me 20 times. We did all around New York, the original. That's how I got so obsessed with that piece, and later I did a big project on it. But that actor was in the first scene in Amadeus. He was the younger man who comes to Salieri at the end, in that insane asylum with Salieri already, I am the patron saint of mediocrity, but he tells him the story of Mozart. That person is somebody I was 20 times on stage, and there were many others. So Juilliard was fantastic for that. And chamber music. Chamber music was really in the big way. I learned there because in Russia somehow we used to stand in front at the entrance of Moscow Conservatory waiting for somebody to form a quartet, to pass the quartet exam, because we had 3 and we needed like a second violinist or maybe a violist or something, and we would get that person said, what can you play, this and that, yeah? And then in an hour we were passing quartet. That's how we, not all the time, but there were moments like this too. So it wasn't very, very much imposed. It was soloist or orchestral player. Soloist or orchestral player. Chamber music was not much. There were a few quartets. But at Juilliard, no. We played, and we used to do it just for fun. We would play those operas, we would play those gigs, orchestra gigs, whatever paid. And then after a full day, after 11 at night, we would get together, whoever lived in a bigger apartment with several people living there. We would get there, get pizza, beer, and go like from 11 till 3 in the morning. We played chamber music. Were there members, future members of Emerson Quartet, Larry Dutton, phenomenal violist, and Phil Setzer, and then Eugene Drucker was there. I mean, we had everybody there. And that orchestra, the Juilliard Orchestra, when we wanted to play, sounded extraordinary. I remember Haydn came in because he was with New York Philharmonic, and he said, that's a better orchestra. But when Juilliard, phenomenal wind players, I mean, they all went on to become principal everywhere. In the back of the section was Shlomo Mintz and, Jimmy Lin, Joyce Swenson, and all the rest of them. Yeah. This was the time when I was at Juilliard. It was great time still.
You also mentioned a few things that I wanted to ask you. So
Tell
the
me.
library.
Yeah, library is
you
fantastic. I
told us
love
about
that.
Then this chamber
Yeah.
music that you mentioned now. And I would like to know which musicians were the most important for you?
For me?
With the most influence for you, especially? Or when
Many.
you made a lot of chamber music
Yeah.
with everybody.
Yeah.
So who
But
your
just as
special one?
yeah, as the one who I often refer early days, besides my violin teachers, of course, I loved Galamin. We were very, very close, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man. Maybe the most honest musician that I have ever met. He would give me 1 hour, and he would give somebody who could barely play the same hour. And he taught from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, maybe with one lunch break, and that's it, all his life. It was extraordinary. And when I asked Peter Unjan wanted to change from delay to Galame Septima, Mr. G, used to call him Mr. G. Yeah, and maybe you talk to him, maybe he'll take me. Delay doesn't really give me any time, because Delay was always with the most glamorous stars. She talked to Shlomo, she talked to Midori later on, Sarah Chang, whoever was making her. The others, 15 minutes lesson. Hani is wonderful. What's wonderful? I mean, that's the kind of teaching I never prescribed. But she could teach very well, but only chosen few. Galamin, absolutely. So I said, Ivan Alexandrovich, because when we one-on-one we spoke Russian, I said, there is this lovely violinist, Peter Ungin. He would love to switch from his teacher to you, because this and that. And he was also Armenian, and Galamin is Armenian. I thought maybe. He said, who is his teacher? He talked like this. I said, his teacher is Dorothy Dillay. I said, impossible. I said, why? She stole so many of my students, which she did towards the end of his life, that I made it a principle. I will not take a single one of hers. Wow. Sure. That is somebody you. So I said, Peter, not going to work, but I do respect that. He would not use the same means as was used against him. That's a mensch right there. So he was, you know, the different influences, but I also refer very often to Yakov Zak. He was a fantastic musician, an absolute endless knowledge of the arts, not only of music. He had the most amazing collection of records, which he was so, we could talk, he and I, we could talk 24 hours about arts, music, sometimes politics, but he was very, very careful about not to. Oh, he was a great, great musician. What I said today, you know, about owning the time, you have to be the master of time. That was him who told me when I was 16 years old. At 16, I was not only the master of time, I was hardly the master of my own body, you know, with all the, you know, all the stuff that goes on at 16. I mean, but I love the concept. I love the concept, owning the time that you can stretch and you can condense. That's playing God, pretty much, which is also, you know, conducting is like playing God. You don't make any sound, and yet you are the responsible, and you have control over every sound. That's very dangerous. That's why so many conductors get completely, you know, bigger than what they actually are, because it is a very dangerous profession. It's like playing God. But owning the time as a performer, that's even more. But that's how delusional we all get. But it's true, you know, that I've seen it because I'm a big fan of theater and movies and everything, and I've known some great actors and watched them and been friends with them and all of that. And I watch how they fill the pause. How certain actors that we all know, Robert De Niro, at his best roles, it's not what he says, it's what he doesn't say. When you just, he totally owns the screen, there's nobody else there, even if there is somebody. I will never forget another great actor who's probably very sick now, Jack Nicholson, who's disappeared for years now. But I remember when he played a secondary role, supporting role, in terms of endearment, with Deborah Winger and Shirley MacLaine. And he appears as an old, as retired, no, wasn't old at that time, he's a retired astronaut who was an alcoholic, he drank. And he just appeared in the corner of the screen. He wasn't even close up, nothing. You couldn't watch anybody except him. Magnetism was sensational. There you see, I saw it in the theater. For instance, when Derek Jacobi, in the play where everybody, England's so good for theater, fantastic actors, and then he went after 20 minutes, and he didn't say anything, just showed up. He's what, and you know that he's the only one on the screen. I've known people like that, and I learned something from them. And that's why when I made my debut with Berlin Philharmonic, it was a momentous occasion, of course. When I was 20, not quite 26, it was 1980.
Was it in 79?
No, it was 79 I won the Chrysler. It was a year later.
So that was the time when you started?
Yeah, but the real proper career I started at 79, yeah. after I won the Chrysler. And also I finished Juilliard after 2 years. So, you know, a great musician who became my friend later on, he said, you know, we don't give long time, we don't need long time to assess a conductor who we don't know or the soloist. A couple of minutes, maybe 5 at the most, you know, and we know. Sometimes we know before they play the first note. It happened to you that when you came to play Prokofiev 1, we saw you, they didn't know me, the new violinist. We all sat differently because there was something about, I brought with me this sense of, because you know, Prokofiev starts right away. You don't need to wait. If you don't play that first theme at your best, you might as well just pack and go, because it never comes back like this. It comes back in a different form to different instruments, it never comes back to you. So, and you play. So, he said there was something about you. It all has to do with energy, with concentration, with sense of purpose, that we all set differently. The same way I feel in competitions, sitting already in the jury. Some of them I know, oh, now something is about to happen, before they play the first note. It's interesting, because the performance starts from the moment you go on stage, because it's also visual. You know how the person comes out, what's about, and imagine ever since I was a little boy, I saw nothing but great performers. You know, so I know exactly what it feels like. This is sort of, stage is my domain. I live on it all my life. And that's an advantage, but it's still, you know, there's no guarantee that so-called inspiration, that, you know, that you will be able to command those spirits to come to you. You hope, you prepare for it, and yet it's still an unknown factor, and that's what makes every performance exciting. Because if we knew exactly what's going to happen, it's not going to be that interesting. It's that unknown, fear of unknown, but in a good way, in a creative way. We don't know whether it will happen or not. But that's why I don't believe, we talked about it before. So if they say, oh, in the evening it will happen, no, it won't. All the great miracles are extremely well prepared. Don't fool yourself that, you know, my father once performed, not once, I'm sure he performed more than once with Richter, but after one of the concerts, they lived next door in the hotel in Budapest. And after all the, whatever it was, dinner, whatever, my father comes back and he hears Richter practicing. The same thing for 2 hours. From Albarada del Grazioso, those things. I mean, the same thing incessantly, you know, all those glissandos this way, that way, that way. I could drive you insane. So my father, I couldn't sleep, so he took violin and also started practicing. What can you do? 2 months later, both my parents were in the hall. Richter's concert, of course, everybody goes. And he played that piece. And when it came to that point, then he realized why he practiced. This was out of this world. So and it seems, oh my God, only Richter could do it. Yeah, after endless practicing hours. Yeah. So all the miracles, they're incredibly well prepared. Because there's nothing really casual about what we do. We talked about it at the rehearsal. It's a very precise work that we do. It's the further thing from approximate. Oh, it'll something like that. English love to say that. But they very often have an amateur approach to what we do. No, it's not going to do something like that. It has to be exactly like the composer wrote, and then some. So I don't buy this at, oh no, in the evening. No, it won't be there. If it's not there in the morning or the night before at the rehearsal, or if you hadn't prepared, It's not, the chances are very little. As somebody I love, my old friend, he bought a t-shirt in Amsterdam. I love that concept. It says here, I can only give one hug a day. Today is not your day. Tomorrow doesn't look good either. I love that. Typical Amsterdam. So, if it's not there today, if you don't get your hug yesterday or this morning, you're not going to get it at night. No, it's for amateurs. It's for people who don't really know what it's about. It has to be there every time. Then there is a good chance that with the pressure of public being there, with the lights, with the nervous factor, then there is a chance. Otherwise, you'll just fall apart. That's the thing.
There's one thing for sure,
Yeah.
from my experience, that
We've
whenever
done it
we
Yeah.
work, what I noticed, you get the best of the musicians.
Oh, thank you.
This is really something special. So, my feelings were always like you said before, that when you come to the stage and you want to make something.
Boom.
Yeah.
This is very special. We could joke about before, but the minute music starts, we're in a different.
It's charisma.
But also, it has a lot to do with. It's a different way of being. You on stage. You look. You move differently. When you're observed by a number of people, you don't go like this because it's out of place. Your movement should be bigger. You make yourself bigger because you observe, if you're in a big auditorium, especially, you project differently. You need to articulate, and I'm talking about, musical phrase, as well as your speech differently. Because it is already, you're projecting, you're talking to an audience. One thing, we could be having dinner, chewing or whatever, drinking, but it's different when you try to perform. Because every time, it's all it is, we're trying to bring the best what we can do with that piece of music. And it inspires us. I mean, look at how lucky we are. I mean, we spend most of our waking hours dealing with the best manifestation of human spirit, which I believe music is. Even Lev Tolstoy said, who was not a bad writer, but he said, if this whole civilization goes down the drain, I won't be sorry so much. The one thing I would be very sorry is music. He didn't mean literature. He meant music, because it is something quite extraordinary, and how it outlives all the horrible things. And that's why people with money, they don't quite understand it. Because some, I told you at the beginning, this Baku, a millionaire, or now he would have been billionaire, he was an enlightened human being. He knew that just by being so wealthy and having the biggest palace in Baku. Now it's a museum, it's not even in his family. But the Opera House is his memorial. He left money for the Philharmonic Hall, also him. He was the most important, Carnegie, look at Carnegie Hall. Who even remembers what he did in his lifetime? He was the most successful industrialist in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Steel. They made so, not anymore, because it's all, now they changed, but at the time. But we all know Carnegie Hall. That's how you buy yourself, if you're a smart billionaire, buy yourself immortality. Or at least you have a continuation of something by being generous. And he wrote a wonderful book that's called Art of Benevolence, which is very much developed in the States. The big companies give a lot of money. And he basically, what he said in that book, that if a rich man, a seriously rich man, dies rich, his life was in vain. He has to give most of what he has away. And the smart ones, even including Bill Gates and that other one and everything, not so sure about Bezos, not so sure about, what's his name, Zuckerberg, but certainly the one from Apple. And, you know, they know, they have incredible foundation, they give a lot of money away. And that's very smart. That's enlightened. That means that you understand there are bigger things in life than money. So what's money? I mean, it's how many bottles of great wine you can drink at the same time. How many great suits you can wear at the same time. How many cars can you drive? Only one. I just read today that Rod Stewart, the great rocker, he loves fast cars. You know, he has Lamborghini, Ferrari. Now he's ready to sell all of it. Why? Because the roads in the country, in England, full of potholes. And he is just furious that I'm going to sell my collection. So it's a silly thing, but it's true. Yeah, he has all the cars, but no good roads to go in there. So what's the point? So, I never was, you know, now I have a better car than I had before, but
some good violins I have.
Oh yeah, violins, yes, violins is something, because violin is my most important companion, really. I don't travel as much with my family, with my wife. I have to arrange everything, special things, so they come along with me, but violin is always there. And so I've had a wonderful, first 12 years I played Andrea Guarneri, beautiful instrument. But it was not maybe big enough for once I started having a big career in the West. So I bought a Strat in 41 years ago.
You bought it. It's hard to imagine now.
Oh yeah. But I bought it over 5 years. I worked hard, and I played a lot of concerts, and I bought it less than 5 years after that, and I owned the Strat for 40 years. And last year I decided 40 years of wonderful time I've had with Strat. Now it's time for somebody else to have it, and also to live a more comfortable autumnal years for my wife, for my family, so I could do something special, but that we'll do also in March and things like that, and many other things. And so I bought another violin, which is in some ways even more special than my Strat. It's not here, but I will bring it in the summer. So if you come to Dissonance, I will have. That's a great Grand Amati, Niccolo Amati, 1651. So now I've owned the Holy Trinity of the greatest violin makers. Andrea Guarneri, who was the first student of Amati, Stradivari, who was the last student of Niccolo Amati, and now I have Niccolo Amati, which is appropriate for my age. Because the violin is, what, imagine 1651, so it's 373 years old. Unbelievable.
Amazing,
yeah. Extraordinary. Wow. You have to see how beautiful it is. When I first saw it, I thought to myself, if it sounds half as good as it looks, I have to have it. Because it's sort of like when you see somebody unbelievably beautiful lady and you think, God, if she's half as smart as the way she looks, I'm going to marry her. But it's something like that. And there is a great story with Bernard Shaw, you know, such a great wit. And this incredibly beautiful lady said, Ned, we must get married, because imagine our children will have your brains and my looks. She said, darling, with my Irish luck, it will have my looks and your brains. So that was the end of that marriage, you know, with my Irish luck. He was so witty, both of them. I mean, there's a great exchange between Winston Churchill and Bernard Shaw. So, Bernard Shaw sends to Prime Minister, to Winston Churchill, 2 tickets. Said, Prime Minister, he had 2 tickets here. Here's 2 tickets to my new play. Bring a friend, if you have any. So comes the return letter. Said, couldn't possibly make the premiere. Would love to come to the second performance, if there is one. Boom. Don't fool with those guys. They always were
So
full of wit.
maybe now
Time to question. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
would be
please.
really nice. So we
Yeah, if
learned
somebody-
a lot of
No,
your life, your study,
Yeah.
what you did. So if
No,
maybe if somebody has a question,
Yes, okay.
Maybe because you started with anecdotes, I loved the one who played your strike before you got it.
Oh,
You
with
know,
with Laredo.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great story. It's because Jamie Laredo played. He bought this violin after he won the Brussels competition in '59. So he bought my violin in '60, and he played it till '69, 9 years. So it's called Ex-Reifenberg because the longest, maybe before me, because I owned it for 40 years. I don't know, Reifenberg, maybe around the same time. So it has a name, Ex-Reifenberg. So when he met Casals, Pablo Casals looked at him and said, Thibaut Reifenberg. Why Thibaut? Because Reifenberg was a big mecenat, the big supporter of the arts. He had a big mansion on Avenue Hoche or in Paris, and he had fantastic chamber music evenings, at which Casals was almost always present because there were many great violinists and only one, maybe 2 maximum great cellists. So Thibaut used to borrow this violin because it was stronger than his own when he played trio with Casals, because Casals was a real danger. And he took, even if you know, have some of the recording of the Haydn trio, he would take violin part and play it on the cello younger. He was not somebody to be to be outdone. No, he was a fierce competitor. But one evening, he told Jamie, they got a company of Eugene Izai, Fritz Kreisler, Jacques Thibault, and George Enescu. Not bad. And Casals. So, in the course of the evening, they played all Mozart, 4 Mozart, 2 viola quintets, in which they changed every quintet. One played first violin, the other played second, one played first viola, the other played. There were no violas present. They all played viola in those days. Not only viola, Kreisler was a fantastic pianist, Enescu was a fabulous pianist, and so forth. But at that point, they only played string instruments. So Jamie, when he heard it, said, "Oh, maestro, please tell me, how were they? How did they play?" I said, "Oh, well," he said, he was always smoking pipe. He said, Enescu and Thibault, they played like princes. So Kreisler, he played like a king.
Like
King.
King.
König, yep, Karol. Izai was an emperor. That's interesting how she described. Yeah, when Izai sat down and took the violin, everybody knew their place. But the most wonderful story with the Enescu and Cortot, that's a beautiful story, because Enescu was accompanying on the piano one of his students in a recital in Zalgavo. And just before the concert, he realized there's no page turner. And he looked in the audience, there was Alfred Cortot. He said, Alfred, do you mind turning pages? Really, I need somebody to turn pages for me. He said, okay. So they did the concert, and Cortot turned pages for him. And then the most extraordinary review came out the next day. The reviewer said it was an interesting evening in Zalgavo. The one who should have played the violin played piano. The one who should have played piano turned pages. And the one who really should have turned pages played the violin. But that's absolutely brilliant, killing review.
So
Yeah,
maybe
but the other, sorry.
Which one was the other?
Chamber music evening.
That was with Heifetz.
No, but all of the guys who changed for different.
I think you mixed two stories.
Ah, yeah?
Yeah, the other one was with Heifetz when he got lost in the place. No, what and what happened?
You played your violin then.
No, my violin played Jacques Thibault.
Thibault.
That's why he said Thibault, Reifenberg.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played my violin, but he never owned it. It belonged to this man whose house they played chamber music. And he writes, I have a letter, copy of a letter, to his sister, they were German Jews. He was writing to her about the chamber music evenings, and he writes about this. I mean, I would have loved to have heard that, those 4 Mozart quintets with those playing. That is quite something. Yeah, but anyway, it's the remarkable thing, of course, in those days was how skillful they were at all the different things. On Sunday, I will tell you the things, and I will show you on some of the playlist. Chrysler, he was not only a great violinist, he wrote incredible transcriptions, he played wonderful piano, he composed. Who knows his string quartet? I'll play one of the movements, from his string quartet, beautiful. And he also wrote operetta, he was a complete musician. Today they just know one thing, one thing only. But I was always interested in many different things, and that's probably why I can do many different things. Because I guess one of the reasons, because my threshold of boredom is very low. I get bored. I couldn't live playing the same concerti all my life, or the same recital program, two of them a whole year. I would go out of my mind, because you need to reinvent them every time you play. In my book, anyway, for me, I do something. One of the hardest things for me was to play 9 times Prokofiev 1, which is really my piece, 9 times in a row with Israel Philharmonic. That's hard, because you go like it's a Broadway show, 8 nights a week, and twice on Wednesday and twice on Saturday. I have no idea how they do it, and they do it and I had the worst example of it. My very first Broadway show was I was looking forward to it. It cost a lot of money at that time for a student. It was King and I with Yul Brynner. I even wrote him a little note, and he never responded to me. But it's not a problem, because I was just nobody at that time, and he was so bored. It was his 5,000 whatever performance of King. He was forgetting words. He hardly sang. His partner also was nothing like what you saw in the movie. I mean, his looks fantastic. You still look pretty impressive. But it was nothing, and I was such a fan of Magnificent Seven. I love that film, if you ever saw the original one. Oh, fantastic. I saw it when I was 5 or 6 years old, made a huge impression. But on Broadway, it was like nothing, because they were so bored of the same thing all the time. You know, I have enormous admiration for the great ones who really put out every time. You know, I saw last time in London, Ian McKellen, my God, 85 years old. He learned new role for himself, Falstaff, in double play. It was 4 hours long. Unbelievable. Then later on he fell, and they stopped. Yeah, he fell to, he lost his balance, and he fell, and he thought that was the end of his life. No, he's back. But incredible memories still there, just to remember the lines. He has so many lines. Anyway, and I'm going very soon after this trip, I'll go to see Oedipus. It's a fantastic new production with great actors, and also I love the theater. I think to live in London and not go to a theater. I hardly ever go to concerts, but theater I do.
So maybe,
Yeah.
now I would like to know if some of the students have some questions. Would you like to know something or ask something? I guess not.
No, let them think. Maybe they'll think of
let
something.
me think. So during that time, maybe because we need slowly to finish.
Yeah.
Do you have, like, in one sentence or 2, 3, what advice do you have for young musicians?
Well, there's
You gave some already, I know.
gave a lot of advice, but the main thing is you have to find your own voice. You have to find, because every one of us has a possibility to say something. We don't say our own words. We play somebody else's words, somebody else's music, I mean, somebody else. But in order to reinvent the known, you know, because unless you have to find your way. You can go and find something less played, undeservedly forgotten. The repertoire is very, very important part. Because if everybody plays the same 3, 4, 5 concertos, like always, that, you know, Sibelius, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, which is way too early anyway, and maybe Mendelssohn, and that's it. It's very difficult to set the world on fire with those, because we've heard them play by the biggest giants of the last, whatever, 200 years, pretty much, or 150 years. So before you try to climb those big mountains like Kilimanjaro, Everest, or, you know, whatever it is, Mont Blanc or Jungfrau, just find something that is much fresher for that. I just gave, you know, the reason I'm giving a lesson next week, because this girl, who's incredibly gifted, just won the 2nd prize in the Viotti competition by playing Tchaikovsky, way too soon by my, I wouldn't have chosen it for her, but I didn't know her before. And she said, oh, I would like to maybe now learn Sibelius. I said, why? It's heavy lifting. You know, it's for a different weight category. Build up your muscles. Learn something that is appropriate for your age, for your development, for your personality. And I gave her several pieces outside of the and she did pick. Spoor number 8, which I adore. And I wrote a cadenza for it, which is really, it's an interesting story. Gingo, when he heard years ago in '83, we spent a lot of time in Vienna, because it was the second Kreisler Krishna came to play a concert, and then I stayed, he was in the jury. Oh, he was such an interesting man. Oh, so many stories. So, he said, what are you doing? What are you playing? I said, I'm going to learn and play Spoor number. Oh, wonderful piece. Don't play it. It's terrible cadenza. It really is a terrible cadenza. He totally ran out of inspiration by that time. But he wrote a wonderful Italian scene, aria with this and that. It's a fabulous piece, by far the best piece. Heifetz played that one of the pieces in his recital debut in New York City with piano in 1917. So he loved it. But he said, don't play his cadenza. It's a terrible cadenza. I wrote a really good one. I'll send it to you. Great. So I waited and waited. He forgot, of course. He never sent it. So I wrote my own. And it's one of my better ones. Yeah. And then, just this summer, I was in Meadowmount giving a master class in the place where I went once in '78 to Galami. And you know, great school. And there was now the new person who runs this, Janet Sum. She was Gingold's student. And so we started talking. And he said, oh my God, I have that cadenza. I said, really? Could you please send it to me? Because I was waiting for that cadenza since '83 for 41 years, you know. So she sent me that cadenza, which I have in meticulous handwriting with pencil, which I also used to write only in pencil. But I already put mine in the Sibelius, so it's now properly printed, so we exchanged. So now I have the new student learning, and she will play my cadenza. So that's good. Smart move, because she's auditioning for a big festival, Akademija, this and that. And I'm sure it will give her an advantage. Because when I sit in the jury and everybody plays the same thing, you have to be, I don't know how phenomenal in order to really say something new in the beaten to death repertoire. So find something. But each one of you has that opportunity to develop your own voice and to say something, even in a well-known piece, something that would be only yours, it would belong only to you. That takes a lot of work, a lot of outside of violin playing work, because ultimately, what do? We tell stories without words for music. But we need to absorb those stories. We have to live those stories. And everything that I do enriches my playing, my way of looking, the way I look at the score, the way I look at the transcription, the way I look at anything. It's not only practicing. It's learning, it's being curious about life, about everything. Because if you only just do one thing, today is not enough. And I think it was always not enough. You know, because there was always Leonardo who did that, or there was Mendelssohn who was master of so many things, and also a great painter. You know, so this is, the more you're curious about things, about life, about parallel arts, completely different ways of, you study, what are we doing when we're born and we go through this? We find out why are we here and what are we here for. So in music, it's not that different. You have to find out what's your best qualities, and that's what you have to explore the most. Because as a violin repertoire, you start knowing nothing. So you start just solo. Then you begin to play a little bit sonatas and this and that. Then you add chamber music, this and that. And in my case, I went further. I started running chamber music festival. Then I started to conduct. I was already writing for script. But in any case, you make it bigger and bigger. And wrongly, I thought that the bigger is better. No, that's a mistake. The more, it's interesting to try it, and I tried even opera, and I tried the biggest, orchestral pieces with choir and this and that. No. Later, I realized the more people involved, when you have orchestra in the pit, singers, which is already red lights everywhere because they could lose their voice, they could do something. Then you have a regisseur who will make them do stupid things, which goes against the music, goes against the story. But you have no chance to, as music directors, who I know very well, they're victims sometimes of bad directors. So you have so many elements that could go wrong. And you're right there in the driving seat, but you're not really in control of all those elements. And so many things could go wrong. So ultimately, it's not better. It's just more complicated. And it's a bit of a megalomania. Because, oh, look at me. Symphony of thousands, all this. Bigger is not better. No. When everything works perfectly in the opera, it's fabulous. But how often that happens? Not very often. For those moments, I did Bohème 6 times, yeah? But what I enjoyed the most was the learning process, because it's such a fabulous piece of music. But it's like with the Mozart score. It's so phenomenal and so perfect. And when it gets to materialize, it's so imperfect, unfortunately. It has to be perfect by all the elements. It's like Mozart score. The best thing is when you hear it inside. Once you start to materialize, it becomes imperfect in some ways. Even Eine kleine Nachtmusik. It's not an easy piece by any stretch. Yeah, but even just the string orchestra, it's already all kinds of problems. But what about all the things and theater and everything? But so for me, I started to cut rather early on. I tried, that was interesting. 25 times Glazunov concerto, retired. About the same, Paganini number 2, retired. Dvorak, less times. Love the piece now. When I listened to my own live recording, I thought, why did I think it was not my piece? Stupid. Now it's too late. But somebody else will play. But you have certain things, you have a special feeling, and others you think, somebody else will play it better. Let somebody else play it. Why not? Why you think even Heifetz did not play everything better than anybody else? Not at all. Try his solo Bach. Oy. Yeah, and some other things. But he was like no one else. So nobody plays everything equally well. You have to find what you do best. That takes time. You have to try different things, no question. And the more you have the influences, the good, interesting ideas, people with the ferment of creativity, the better it is for you. You become, I read a wonderful article not long ago about this actor, wonderful English actor. He might be Scottish, I'm not sure. But anyway, he acts in England in some very important TV series, Slow Horses. Have you seen? Oh, it's fantastic with Gary Oldman. Anyway, so this guy, he said, it's very interesting. I love when the great ones get together. They love chamber music in acting. They feed off each other. They don't just come in and know their lines and that's it. No. They change every time somebody's gifted. Oh, that's it. And it's such a wonderful feeling. That's the great art. There's no question of technique or how you do it. That's already, they've been there, they've done it. It's an interesting idea. You give me an interesting, phrase, and it will change my reply. That's how I always, two things, we talked about listening to yourself, but also listening to each other while you play. It's one of the most important things in music making. For me, they divide into categories: the ones who play well and the ones who play well and hear everybody around them. They are the real musicians for me. If they just played well your instrument, it's not enough. You have to listen to everybody and respond to it. That would be the biggest advice I could give
Sounds easy.
you. Sounds easy.
So I think.
Because you've always done it, so it's easy for you.
So I think we.
Yeah, we should stop.
I think
yeah,
we should stop now.
Yeah,
So
always.
thank you very much for your time.
A pleasure.
Thank you for coming and.
Wonderful, very attentive audience. Very attentive audience.
In vljudno vabljeni na naslednje dogodke. V nedeljo ob 11. bomo imeli predavanje. Golden Age tudi tukaj.
Golden Age of Ireland.
Violinist. Pa še kakšen filmček bomo videli mogoče.
On Sunday, yeah.
Ja,
We'll be here again?
Here,
Yeah,
in
okay.
this place. In seveda tudi vabljeni na
Tisti
tisti.
vprašanje.
Ja, absolutno,
Of
končno.
course.
What do you like in this in the space of Slovenia that you return once time more, once
Oh,
time
I
more,
love
once
others.
time,
One of my
many times?
favorite places to go.
You see.
I'll tell you why. First of all, it's really one of the most musical countries that I know, because it has great tradition. You look at this Philharmonic Hall, Schubert, Mahler, Paganini played there. I mean, everybody's so musical. Of course, it was part of the, great empire, but it had its own. What I love about today's Slovenia, small country, but it has so much beauty in it. And even more importantly, you go to a lot of beautiful places. My wife totally agrees with me, and we just talked before I coming back. So the reason I love coming to Slovenia, apart from all the musical experience, which are wonderful every time, but people here, like Clement, like Janusz, like my friends, Maya, from Dissonance, or people, they always show me something beautiful in the country. They love their country, and they want to share it with me, with my family, with my friends, and everything. And therefore, I said, I think we know Slovenia from all my trips better than any country where I go perform and do anything, because they're wonderful hosts. It's not enough that you just come to the rehearsal and then goodbye, see you tomorrow. No, it's never like this. We always have a lot of interesting talks and always plan trips, and another one comes on Sunday. So I look forward. Every time I learn, Clement took us to fantastic places, to both lakes, Bled and Bohin, and up to the mountain there, and to different places with caves. My God, lepers on horses. We did so much, and to the coast, and we had a swim there in the place where Tartini was born. I know the country. I always I sound like a travel agency when I talk to my friends. You gotta go to Slovenia. Some people don't even know where it is. I mean, they think it's Slovakia or something. I mean, they have no idea. I said, it's the best hidden secret of Europe. And you don't necessarily want it to be too publicized, because then too many people will come, I know. But it's fantastic. It really is fantastic. And also the level. I mean, in England, they wish they could play like that at the first rehearsal when I come in, or many professional orchestras. No. It's very, you've got something very, very good going. And that's why I love to return. Because it feels like I'm among like-minded people. Not only personal friends, but also musical friends. You know, that I speak the language you understand. You know, I don't have to tell you some banal things that you've heard already so many times. Like, we could really delve into, I mean, we talked about some really fine points already today. And that's the first day. Usually you just try to organize the process, you know, what comes. But that was only with the big instruments. It takes a while.
If I may ask, what
Sure.
are the other pieces you recommended to that girl who wanted to play?
Well, Wieniawski number 2, for instance, not played enough. Beautiful concerto. Also, Ernst concerto, nobody plays. Wonderful piece. Then, of course, there is also, you know, there is now Korngold is being played, but that's also a big, big piece. Korngold. There are other pieces, for instance, Konius. Nobody knows it anymore. Somebody brought it to play not well, but anyway, it was very interesting. In Mexico, I was giving a master class, one of the Mexican students brought, and I looked at the music, he gave me a copy of the music, was my old Russian colleague of student who teaches in Mexico. It was her part. And it says, with Maya Samolna, with Glezarova's markings in it. And he's just, you know, but it's a beautiful piece. When I asked Zuckerman, he was, because he spent some time at that time with caregivers, so he talked about Shostakovich. I said, you telling me about Shostakovich? You never even played a single concerto of his, not first and second. Why? So Pinky, the guy who's, you know, 7, 8 years older than me, he said, do you know, Galamin didn't give us Shostakovich, he gave us Konius. I said, when was the last time you took a lesson with Galamin? Probably 69 or something. I mean, those days they didn't play, they didn't know Shostakovich. Concerto number 1 or number 2 was just written. I was in the premiere of the number 2. Of course. I mean, I come from Jurassic Park. People think that, you know, I heard the last 3 symphonies premiere, 13, 14, and 15 at the premiere. I heard the sonata premiered by Oistrakh and Richter. I was there. I heard also the second violin concerto and incredible block cycle, which I love, and I've recorded it with my daughter. You saw it on the website. But I was at the premiere where it was Vishnevskaya, was written for her, Rostropovich, Oistrakh, and at the piano was Mieczyslav Weinberg. Not Richter, not Shostakovich himself, but Mieczyslav Weinberg. It was in 67, imagine. And violin concerto was, I think, written by 68, and the sonata in 69. Because he thought it was Oistrakh's. He got the dates mixed up, and he thought it was Oistrakh's 60th, but it was 59, so he wrote sonata a year later. I was there, of course. How could you miss that? I mean, these are big things in your life, you know. But that's what makes the life interesting. It's the people you heard, the people you learned from, the stories that you heard, and then you told it to other people. And that's how it is. You know, because today, hardly anybody reads books, unfortunately. I read a lot of books, but I love audiobooks. When somebody very smart is telling me something. You know, I walk very often. I love walking, so I put my headphones and Stephen Fry reads me Odysseus. Oh, fantastic. Or some famous, you know, Woody Allen, his biography in his voice. Mel Brooks and, you know, Stephen King, great writer. He just was banned by Twitter because he called Elon Musk that he's the first lady, Elonia Musk. Bravo. And so he was banned from Twitter. So I'm about to leave Twitter. Goodbye. Now, if Stephen King was banned, that's enough for me. It's a wonderful book on writing, Stephen King. Do you know Stephen King? Yeah, of course. A hero of fantastic books. Not only the scary one. Oh, Shawshank Redemption, one of the greatest films and scares. And Misery is also, oh my God, I mean, he was a brilliant, genius, absolute genius. And
Sorry.
that's it. Yeah,
So,
we've got to go.
You know,
Otherwise, we'll get kicked out.
They will
Kick
shut
us
the
out.
academy down
Let's go. Let's go.
in a few
Let's go.
minutes. So.
Anyway.